Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my contribution is on the evolution in the study of fundamental laws and the basic constituents of nature. In this report, the reason why physics will be the basis for the study of evolution and complexity in science is the famous Enrico Fermi statement, namely, the queen of all sciences is physics. So let me start with the three types of matter. We have seen during this interesting seminar that the universe where we live is made with three types of matter: inert matter with life, inert matter with life and with reason. In all these three types of matter, evolution and complexity are present. What happens? Why I should push 10 times before it changes? Scientific research deals with these three types of matter. Therefore, there are three classes of science. The science which studies matter without life, the science which studies matter endowed with life, and this science which studies matter with life and reason. We are the only example of the third type of matter, and this brings us to the necessity of three big bangs. The three big bangs are BB1, from vacuum to the universe of inert matter. If life was not there, this universe would be exactly the same. BB2 goes from inert matter to living matter. This Big Bang 2 is at present studied in very many laboratories in the world. Some of them are secret labs. Hundreds of people are working on what is called the problem of minimal life, namely how many pieces of inert matter you need in order to build the first piece of living matter. And there I have to report to you the number, which is not agreed among all specialists, which is 10 to the 11. Because with 10 to the 11, you can still have quantum relations between the pieces, because Excel must be something which is interacting in all these pieces. BB3 is the Big Bang where you go from living matter without reason to living matter with reason. Where the three Big Bangs are is unfortunately not very much visible in this diagram, which will go back in during the course of this report. Big Bang 1 is on the left of universe, and the universe plays a central role on this diagram. But the universe that we studied, and the synthesis is below the universe box, will be exactly the same if life was not there. Self-interaction needs Big Bang 2, and reason needs Big Bang 3. We'll discuss this figure later. The greatest achievements of our intellect in the immanent is now going to be presented to you. Our existential sphere has two components. One is in the immanent, the other in the transcendent. The existential sphere in the transcendent manifests itself in what is called religion. We will discuss the immanent only. A careful study of the immanent reality leads to the conclusion that it is based on three pillars: language, logic, and science, which are the greatest achievements of our intellect in the immanent. Language, from which collective and permanent memory are born, thanks to writing. Rigorous logic, which has given rise to the great construction. It started with the geometry, and then it developed with arithmetic, algebra, analysis, topology, and analysis includes geometry, but this we didn't know when all this started. From now on, logic will mean rigorous logic. Science has 3 levels, which allows the certainty that the world is not ruled by chaos, but by a rather rigorous logic, which laws that are valid from the heart of a proton, which means a millionth of a billion of a centimeter, to the extreme limits of the universe, which we were discussing a few minutes ago, which is a million, billion kilometers. We are the only form of living matter, as I said already, with the extraordinary privilege of possessing reason. It is thanks to this privilege that language, logic, and science have been discovered. So we have the sequence reason, language, logic, science, and science, no matter what, namely inert matter, living matter with reason. Science has 3 levels of credibility. Figure 1 synthesizes the content of language. What is language? Can be spoken or written, and this is the written one is permanent collective memory. We are the only form of living matter which has been able to produce permanent collective memory. Language means poetry, literature, arts, music, cinema, philosophy, economy, fashion, and all other intellectual activities. All these intellectual activities would exist if neither logic, rigorous logic, better known as mathematics, nor science had been discovered. So language are all intellectual activities we can elaborate, produce, imagine, using our intellect, but impossible to be formulated in terms of rigorous theoretical logic, which means mathematical formalism, or to be translated in terms of a reproducible series of experiments. This is what language does. Logic. Next figure shows the content of logic with its sequence of arithmetic, algebra, analysis, and topology. Arithmetic, as you know, is the theory of numbers. Algebra is theory of variables. Each x, y, z is all the series of numbers. Analysis is the theory of functions. And topology is the theory of domains where functions exist. All these rigorous logic activities would exist even if science had never been discovered. The science which studies the inert matter has 3 levels of credibility. These 3 levels are, the first one is where there are experiments whose results can be reproduced in the laboratory. Example, the discovery of the fundamental laws. Second level is where it is not possible to intervene in order to produce a result. Example, stellar evolution. And one-off event, which apparently is in contradiction with the reproducibility of science, and this is cosmic evolution. Why it is science? The third level, like the cosmic evolution. Because whatever mathematical formulation you make in order to describe the cosmic evolution cannot be in contradiction with what has been discovered at the first level. All these 3 levels need, attention please, inventions, discovery, and measurement. In the next figure, the 3 levels of science are exemplified in terms of the Galilean inventions, discoveries, and basic measurements for the first 2, and the third one refers to the 20th century invention, discovery, and measurement, of what happened to the cosmic evolution 380,000 years after the Big Bang 1. People always say that this is the Big Bang. It's wrong. Big Bang observed in the cosmic evolution is what happened 380,000 years after the Big Bang. I'm sorry, but this is unreadable. And this is the 3 levels of science: need, invention, discovery, and measurement. For example, Galilei invented the inclined plane, the pendulum, and he discovered the law of inertia, the fact that force is not proportional to velocity but to acceleration, the principle of action and reaction, which had been discovered 1,800 years before by Archimedes, and the principle of relativity. And he measured for the first time in our civilization the acceleration by gravity. Why people were unable to measure G? Because it's too strong. In 1 second, a stone goes down by 5 meters. How can you measure this? The invention of inclined plane allowed this measurement to be done. At the second level of scientific credibility, the invention is the telescope. With the telescope, Galilei discovered the irregularity in celestial bodies like the moon, the sun, the Jupiter satellites, the Saturn ears, which are called now rings, the phases of Venus, the structure of the Milky Way, and he measured the cosmic clock. He allowed a measurement of what can be called the cosmic clock, namely thanks to the Jupiter satellites. The third level needs to wait until this century. Invention, microwave detectors by Penzias and Wilson. How they discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation? They didn't know what they were doing. They were building the most perfect circuit. And this fantastic circuit had a noise which they were not able to get rid of until the news arrived in the ear of physicists who said, but this is exactly what we wait for, the cosmic background radiation in microwave. And the measurement was the black body spectrum at 2.7 degree Kelvin. So the third level needed the invention of advanced microwave detectors who played the role of noise in their measurements. And this noise was isotropic and impossible to be eliminated by Penzias and Wilson. Now here, I'm sorry, but the diagram is not visible very well from here. Anyhow, this is the evolution. Now we show you 2 ways of studying the evolution, from inert matter to matter with life and reason. If you go down, you have a billion of years, which is the formation of this planet. How the planet started to rotate around the sun. Big Bang 2 is very near, is a logarithmic scale, and this is the monocellular construction. And then you have on the top the Big Bang tree, namely when the form of matter with life was given reason. This is the same story, but versus energy. This one is versus time. On the vertical axis, there are from billion years to 1 year. And here is energy. The Big Bang 1 is on the bottom. And if you look at the top, you see Big Bang 2, Big Bang 3, in terms of energy. Could we exist if the temperature was not going to be the value indicated at BB2 and BB3, the answer is no. So our existence is strongly related to the evolution of the universe versus energy. This is a much more complicated and sophisticated analysis, which I have no time to illustrate, but I want to show you that we are also studying what there was before Big Bang 1. The Big Bang 1 is the vertical axis towards the right of this diagram, and what happens before the Big Bang 1 is subject of theoretical investigations, hoping that all this is going to produce experiments to be performed. The enormous consequences of Big Bang 3 are reported in the next figure. Let me call your attention on a very important detail. We could not know anything about Big Bang 1 and Big Bang 2 if the third Big Bang had not taken place. The position of Big Bang 1 and Big Bang 2 in the next figure and all other details are the results of Big Bang 3. This is the same picture, which is invisible, but in the paper you can have a look at the details. I just want to call your attention on the fact that the only way to know how the universe is looking at the right-hand side where there is LLS, language, logic, and science. The rigorous theoretical logic could not care less about how the universe is made. Language does care. In fact, language, people speak of the universe according to what they think the universe can be. But the only way to know what the universe is with the three credibility levels of science, which is on the right called S, which goes back to the universe. From the Planck universe to Einstein-Schwarzschild and the universe now is the big problem we have. And the conclusion of this analysis, namely the Planck universe to Einstein and Schwarzschild, is that we probably understand why the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons in the universe now is 10 to the 80, and the vacuum in the universe, which is 98%, our universe is essentially empty. Only 2% is full of matter. This is how we can conclude about the analysis starting from the Planck universe and using the Schwarzschild solution of the Einstein equation, where at the very end of this I will show two graphs, if I have time. And this is the reason why we can predict the existence of two types of black holes. The primordial black holes, where matter has only the gravitational charge, and the standard black holes, where matter is made with protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now, the next point is very interesting. Nature does not follow simplicity. And this is how visual history and visual physics comes into the analysis. Platonic simplicity has two examples: the Platonic grand unification and the Platonic supersymmetry, which I will try to illustrate very briefly. This is the Platonic grand unification. In the three axes, there is alpha 1, alpha 2, and alpha 3, namely alpha 1 is the gauge coupling of the fundamental force called electricity, quantum electrodynamics. Alpha 2 is the Fermi force, or the weak force, and alpha 3 is the strong force. Platonic simplicity would be the blue line, which goes to the convergence at about 19 10 to the 16.2 GeV. GeV means billion of electron volts. But nature follows the red line, which has nothing to do with simplicity. This is the mathematics, which I have no time to illustrate. It's a system of three differential nonlinear equations coupled, which have no analytic solution, only modelistic solution. The Platonic grand unification has a certain number of detailed structures, and the Platonic supersymmetry is a fantastic story, because we think that we understand a lot about the gauge principle. The gauge principle should produce the gauge force. This is how the fundamental forces are believed to exist. And this means that gauge boson must be there. If nature was platonically simple, platonically supersymmetric, supersymmetry transformation should produce gauginos. So, fermions and bosons. First deviation from Platonic simplicity. Our fermions are not gauginos. Second deviation from Platonic simplicity. The fundamental fermions are of two different classes, leptons and quarks. Third deviation from Platonic simplicity. There is not only one, but three families, three columns of fundamental fermions. Fourth deviation from Platonic simplicity, the fundamental fermions do get mixed. Fifth deviation, there are many mixing. So you see that nature does not choose simplicity. Now, let us have a look at the two asymptotic limits of simplicity, namely history, which is the asymptotic limit of complexity, and science, which is the asymptotic limit of the smallest possible complication. History and physics have in common the fact that all events originate in a totally unpredicted way. They have in common another feature, evolution. This is why history is also known as EWRL, evolution of the world in its real life. And science is evolution of our basic understanding of the laws governing the world in its structure. If we compare visual history and visual physics, the conclusion is that visual history would obey the same logic as visual physics does, only if destiny was there. This is the most exact definition of destiny. What is visual history? I just give you an example. There are so many examples. Look at the red stuff. What would be our world if the first nuclear weapon had been built either by Japan before Pearl Harbor, 1941, or by Hitler in 1942, or by Stalin in 1943? We would have here the picture of Stalin if this would have happened in 1943. So this is visual history defined by historians. History would not be as it is if any of these events would have taken place. What is visual physics? Visual physics is known to obey the logic of nature in its fundamental structure and forces. Visual physics will not change. Suppose Galileo had not discovered F equal mg. So what? Somebody else would have discovered. It took 1800 years from Archimedes to Galilei. But somebody would have discovered. Suppose that Dirac had not discovered the equation which opens new horizon, including the existence of the anti-world. Somebody else would have discovered. Yes. Thank you very much. Our chairman tells me that we have 5 minutes, so I have to jump to the conclusion. Otherwise, we stay here until tomorrow morning. The most spectacular, this I have to show you, the most spectacular example of simplicity in visual physics is this diagram. Look at the left. I was the pupil of Blackett, who discovered in 1932 the production of electron and anti-electron, wherefrom virtual physics, which has been discussed here today, has been created, imagined, and worked out. At the left, there is virtual physics. A photon produces a pair of V plus E minus and becomes again a photon. Look at the lamp shift in 1947. Not one single physicist in this planet had imagined this elementary process, which is virtual physics, where an electron emits a photon and reabsorbs the photon. If you look at the left, at the virtual physics of the vacuum polarization, it's a very complicated diagram. It's alpha square. So this is what nature tells us. Oh, this I have to tell you. The study of the fundamental laws and of the basic constituents of nature, all discoveries came without anyone being able to predict their existence. 3 examples: the atomic, the nuclear, and the subnuclear universes. The laws and regularities of these 3 universes no one had ever been able to predict. Why? Because the order of the logic of nature is smarter than all of us, philosophers, artists, poets, mathematicians, scientists. And here are the details, for those who don't think that I'm right. All the detailed structure of what is going on. I was 60 years younger than now when the red discovery came in. There was another charge, fundamental charge, called strangeness, because no one understood what this charge was doing and why it was there. And Fermi objected that this strange particle, this strange charge, could not exist. Why? Because a charge must have its opposite sign, +1, -1, for the same object. It cannot be that it is +1 for mesons and -1 for baryons. And this is the discovery 67 years ago with the Blackett group, where I was, for the proof that indeed the strange charge was a fundamental new charge of nature. Now here are all the details about what I said. Let me go to the conclusion. Well, evolution generates complexity. You have to believe in me. I have no time. Conclusion and the project for mankind. We have proved that Anderson, Feynman, Beethoven, and unpredicted events with enormous consequences, so AFB and UEEC, which are at the origin of evolution and complexity, with consequences permeating all our existence, from molecular biology to life, in all its innumerable forms up to our own, including history, do exist at the fundamental level. This has been proved. What is AFB? Anderson, because Anderson wrote a paper in 1972 and got the Nobel Prize, 1-page paper. Why Feynman? Because Feynman was working with me, and we had discovered the same thing, but he didn't write a paper. We wanted to have a session in Erich discussing this point. Why Beethoven? Because I decided I want to be understood by everybody in the world. What did Beethoven? Composed masterpieces of music. Does anybody have any doubt about this? But he didn't know the law of acoustics. This is exactly AFB. Anderson, Feynman, Beethoven. Phenomenology is the proof of complexity. And UEC is the proof of complexity. Complexity is ill-defined. There are more than 60 definitions of complexity. I've selected 7 definitions, and I've proved that the experimental proof for the existence of complexities, which is, I repeat, with at least 60 definitions, are only 2. The Anderson, Feynman, Beethoven conditions, and UEEC, which are called by historians Sarajevo type events. totally unpredicted. A man was killed in Sarajevo. How many people are killed? But this produced the First World War and the Second World War. It turns out that evolution and complexity in the real world exist no matter the mass, energy, and space-times considered. We have discovered this thanks to reductionism. Therefore, we must go on with reductionism. What can evolution predict for the future? Totally unexpected effects should show up, effects which are impossible to be predicted on the basis of our knowledge. Not concerning the confusion about predictions and UEEC, Sarajevo-type events. The mathematical descriptions, and therefore the predictions for new phenomena to be discovered in the field opened by the given UEEC event, come after the UEEC event, never before. The most fantastic proof of this is quantum electrodynamics. Reductionism is the only way we have to investigate the logic of nature. An important detail should be pointed out. Science and technology are different. Science implies discoveries. No one can invent the existence of a fundamental force or of a basic constituent of nature. Technology implies inventions. Invention exploits either a fundamental force of nature or a basic constituent of nature, or both. The invention, attention please, can be for mankind, peaceful technology, but also against mankind, war technology. This is why technology evolution must be under the control of ethics. Scientific discovery, no, since all that we scientists can do is to decipher what is written in the book of nature, which is in front of us with the three types of matter. The author of the book is the fellow who created the world. The next figures are a synthesis of the evolution of our knowledge from language to science versus time, and versus two basic pillars, namely Planck and complexity. This is, I'm sorry, is not very well visible, but this is the evolution from language on the right to science, and through rigorous logic, and you see that there are two names, Archimedes and Galilei, and the distance of 1800 years. And on the extreme left, there is the present status of science. From Archimedes to Galilei, 1800 years have been lost. What we would know now, what our future generations will know in the year 3814. The reason why the great discoveries of Archimedes have been neglected during 1800 years is the culture which was needed to give to the stones the same values given to the stars. A culture was needed which gave to the stones the same cultural value of the stars, i.e., to be depository of the imprint of the fellow who created the world. Stones and stars have the same author. This is what Galilei said. And this did our culture with Galileo Galilei. Here are the words of Galileo Galilei about Archimedes. Galilei is the father of modern science. Archimedes was the first fellow who was able to read through the lens of mathematics the book of nature. Now, where we are, 40 years ago, the Planck energy came into our world. I was 40 years younger than now, and I know very well what happened since then. The energy we were using was just nonsense, was ridiculous. 10 GeV, 1 GeV is 1 billion electron volts, and Planck energy is 10 to the 19 GeV. And we realized that this is what should have been studied, the Planck energy, and all the consequences. We will see something telegraphically in the next few minutes. Now, what is the new story to be seriously considered? Complexity at the fundamental level. Are we going from reductionism to holism? I say no, but we have to prove it. Why not? So let me give you the Planck universe units. What Planck did in 1900, more than 100 years ago, he said, 1 centimeter means nothing, 1 second means nothing, 1 gram means nothing. Why? Because this is based on us, human being. Can you believe that the universe is going to be controlled by what we are doing? Why our heart is oscillating every second? Nonsense. So what should we take? The three fundamental constants, the three quantities which never change with time. We have heard here that we have proved that the constants are indeed constants. We have studied the constancy of the constant, and we confirm this, no question about it. Now, if you take as fundamental quantities the fundamental constants, then the conclusion is that the length, the fundamental length, is 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. The fundamental mass is 10 to the minus 5 grams. In terms of energy, this corresponds to 10 to the 19 billion electron volts, while our energy now around in the world is few electron volts. We could not live in a hotter universe. And the time, which is the most fantastic of all, 10 to the minus 44 seconds. This is the time that takes for Big Bang 1. The world we come from is the Planck black hole, whose density is 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cubed, which means very billion of universes in 1 centimeter cube. The future of our world depends on the progress of our cultural evolution, which cannot mix science and technology. This is why our recommendation to the church and to the political world need to remember Saint John Paul II statements. Science and faith are both gifts of God. Men could perish from the effects of technology that he himself develops, not from the truths that he discovers by means of scientific research. And the third statement is, as at the time of spears and swords, so today, in the missile age, what kills more than weapons is man's art. In fact, His Holiness Pope Francis, following the Year of Faith, has focused the attention of modern culture on man's heart for a future where a great alliance between faith, science, and technology would become effective. This great alliance needs a project, the project for mankind. What is the project for mankind? In the scientific cycles, it has been given the name of the New Manhattan Project. Why? Because if you read what is projected there, the New Manhattan Project says that if there is a political will, the planetary emergencies can be confronted and overcome. Let us not forget the risk that we have been exposed to, which we cannot forget, and the incredible fact that in 1940 the word nuclear was not existing. In 1945, a scientific discovery called nuclear fission produced nuclear reactors, which is nuclear fire, 1 billion times more effective than the electromagnetic fire, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 5 years. So, if there is political will, we should be able to produce in few years a new Manhattan Project. where finally the scientific research, the scientific discoveries come into the life of every day. I invite you to reflect on the following point. How can you imagine that something which is nuclear is called atomic? The bomb of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are still now called atomic. I had the privilege of knowing all members of the Manhattan Project but Fermi because he died too young. And they told me, Oppenheimer, Wigner, Fermi, and the general were at the top of the Manhattan Project. So when it was proved that indeed the fission works very well, the name had to be given to this instrument. So Fermi, Wigner, Oppenheimer said this is a nuclear weapon. The general, which was representing the maximum link with the government, said, distinguished professors, no one knows what is nuclear. The most advanced word we can use is atomic. And this is the reason why this incredible mistake of calling atomic what is nuclear has taken place. So do not underestimate what means culture. And the proof is not only this semantic story, but the 1800 years lost from Archimedes to Galilei, because Archimedes was working with water and stones, but the culture was not ready to accept this type of study of nature. This is the project for mankind, the new Manhattan Project, which I have no time to illustrate. This is just, in the red, there are the projects going on now. This would be just dreaming if it was not based on something already existing in the correlation between technology, science, and culture. This is the project for mankind. And on the right, for example, you have what we already study, namely, for example, mathematics and medicine. We have established that 60% of medical interventions are just wrong. They were not necessary. Why they have taken place? Because of culture. Because medical staff are terrified by being subject to judgment if they make a mistake. And 60% is a big number. And what about the concept of democracy? Mathematics and democracy has been studied by us, and there's not a function, there is impossible to have a minimum in the function describing in all possible ways what we mean by democracy. And in fact, democracy has lost its fundamental reason to be there. Why? Because democracy is the reason, the point is that we could not have here 500 people or 1 million people. In Italy we have 60 million people. We cannot have a room with 60 million places. In the earth we have 7 billion people. But modern technology allows us, and I have here the proof, I can push a button and say yes or no if a law is proposed. So direct democracy becomes possible. All these problems are not discussed, and this represents an example of the 72 planetary emergencies which the Project for Mankind should care. I have no time to go on, but just I wanted to tell you that our academy should indeed be involved in this important contribution to civilization. Thank you.